Hey, welcome to today's show. Got a little special, different format. Usually our guests that when we have them on are dialing in from outside, but we got a live show with a couple of guys from Denver that are working on an awesome project, the Invictus Project. And I'm not going to try to tell you too much about it, but I've got Sam and Jeff here with me. And just to kick us off, I'd love to just start off with give me just a quick summary of where you're coming from, how you got here, and what we're doing.
Yeah, so my name's Jeff Hoagland. We met Otis at Patriot Boot Camp.
Yep.
Was the first interaction, and he gave us some very solid mentoring advice that was also very obvious once he said it to us. It was like just very eye-opening.
I'm a master of the obvious. He'll tell you. Did
you get out as a captain?
Yeah.
Oh. But Sam and I both served as bomb technicians in the Army, EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. I was in for about 10 years with multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Like most vets, suffered from the typical veteran experience when you get out: mental health issues, PTSD, TBI, some pain issues with my spinal fusion, and walked through the bureaucracy of the VA and saw how it fell short and actually almost led to my suicide. And that's why we created the Invictus Project, which we can expand a little bit more about. But Sam, why don't you?
Yeah, Jeff and I have very similar stories. I'd been deployed to Afghanistan twice while I was in the Army. After my second deployment, I got back and was really struggling with PTSD and depression. It eventually, after going to the Army through the traditional channels, was just being pumped pill bottle after pill bottle. Hey, try this new pill and wait 10 weeks to see if it works. And that just made the symptoms worse, and eventually, led to Christmas Eve 2014. I had my 45 in my mouth, and I was about halfway through pulling the trigger when my phone went off, and that text message saved my life. And Jeff and I really didn't understand why we were given extra time on this planet until a month after Jeff's suicide attempts. A mentor of ours walked out into his backyard and shot himself with his 3-year-old son in the house. And it was at that point that we hadn't coalesced this idea yet, but we knew that somehow we were responsible for taking a stand and fixing this problem, because nobody else was going to do it.
Initially, it was let's take some accountability for our own care, because we're clearly not going to get the care we need through traditional mental health avenues, and started doing a bunch of research on how pharmaceuticals actually promote worsening symptoms and inflammation in the brain. And
Yeah, I mean, I see that in everything.
Yeah.
Every single one of those antidepressants and those various things. One of the side effects is thoughts of suicide, and it's like, what the fuck? Why are we giving this to people if it's gonna cause that?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Did y'all serve together when you were?
we were in the same unit briefly.
Yeah, very
Okay.
briefly. I really started to get to know Jeff after he had already grown his beard.
Yeah, after I got out. After I returned from Thailand, I did a short stint in Thailand where I fought professional Muay Thai, which also not very smart for traumatic brain injury. But
Turns out it makes it worse.
yeah, it turns out it makes it a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
But definitely enjoyed my year out there. And when I came home, I knew of Sam on active duty. We were in the same unit briefly. I was not a huge fan of Sam
I'm
on
not a
active
huge
duty.
fan of Sam either.
Oh, that's classic. That's classic. That son of a bitch over there in that other platoon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. So there's not many people that did like Sam on active duty.
I don't blame him.
But we grew into really, really close friends after. So
what connected y'all to? Where did you connect?
At the bar.
yeah, we had mutual friends, and I was a frequent customer at a very specific bar, because that was the only way I could find relief, was drinking about a fifth of whiskey every night. And luckily, I had some awesome bartenders that would give me very, very cheap bar tabs for the amount of alcohol I was consuming. So we had fellow friends within the UAD community that kind of connected us, and it started off as just like us giving each other a hard time and taking each other in small doses to all of a sudden becoming really, really good friends. So
I grow on people much like a cancer.
and he's hard to get rid of, much like cancer.
No matter how much radiation we throw
You're
at
stuck
it.
with me forever.
Oh, that's great. So you got connected through a mutual friend. What was the catalyst? I mean, I understand, the pharmaceuticals and that frustrated you. But were you sitting at the bar tossing them back and comparing your pill bottles, or
No.
kind of what was that catalyst that made you start moving forward?
So I almost committed suicide April 2015. I wasn't very open about that suicide attempt to anyone. And there was zero red flags. I'd actually taken my son on a road trip to visit my family 3 weeks prior to that. Nobody knew, but I was saying my goodbyes. Like, that was the whole reason I was going. And then April 2000.
So you were being very methodical. This wasn't.
I'd already been
laying out.
I'd already been planning it for about 5-6 months prior to that.
Yeah.
So I was just tired of dealing with going into the VA and being handed another prescription bottle when I'm saying, hey, the symptoms are getting worse. So and literally the only relief I could find was at the bottom of the Jameson bottle, and clearly that doesn't help with symptoms either.
No.
I got home from Afghanistan, knew I was getting out, and knew I was coming home to divorce papers of my wife of 8 years, and pretty much lost my identity and all of my support system all at once. So that, coupled with dealing with some TBI symptoms and some mental health issues, it just downward spiral. And Sam was actually the first guy I talked to about it and opened up about how much I was struggling. And Sam had already known. He was pretty intuitive about it, and he's telling me I need help. And so the help I found was in his friendship, a lot, actually. And the catalyst ended up being when Neil took his life on Memorial Day weekend, 2015. My son saved my life that night when I tried to attempt. He was 4 years old at the time, didn't know it. He probably doesn't even know it now. But he sleeps like a baby, and at 2 a.m, he knocked on the door right when I was about to pull the trigger. And very, very grateful for that, because I almost transferred all of my pain onto my son. And I don't think he'll ever understand the gift that he gave me. But Neil's son was 3 and was left in the house when he shot himself. And so that became the catalyst for what Sam and I decided to do. We realized that if we don't take some accountability and some ownership and try to fix the problem ourselves, it's not going to get fixed.
Yeah, so we went around and we used ourselves as test dummies. Yeah, we went around and used ourselves as test dummies. We tried out a variety of different treatment modalities on ourselves, and we took the ones that worked the best and had the most research behind them, and we put them together into a comprehensive treatment protocol that can address the root cause of traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, and depression.
Yeah, and it's not like we were just trying anything that we read on the internet. We looked for peer-reviewed data prior to seeking out those treatments.
Now, when you say peer-reviewed data, did you actually go into the medical side of peer-reviewed data?
Yes.
Or okay,
Yeah, a lot of it's open source. I mean, you can Google it and see plenty of peer-reviewed medical articles about our treatments individually. We're the first ones to combine all of them together, though.
Well, I'd like to jump in on that for a second. That's something I've read about before. A lot of different industries that have been around for a really long time, they have these issues that just kind of have built over time, and now they're just so big we can't handle them. And the medical field has a lot of those. And it just really speaks for it that y'all are able to go through, look at that data that's out there, and then pull a better medication plan out of it, out of data that's already there, even though the system itself struggles so much to pull that data sometimes. And I've heard it called so much, it sounds idiotic almost, but just evidence-based medicine. That's all it is just looking at the evidence of statistically this works, statistically this doesn't, and obviously you take the one that does. And if it doesn't work, there's no reason to keep trying it.
We were really fortunate in the fact that EOD taught us a very, very complex form of critical assessment. And when you break EOD down into basically its foundation, it's in trend analysis, risk mitigation, and evidence collection. And so we were able to look at these trends that we see, not just within the veteran community, but also mental health epidemic as a nation. There's a ton of research that shows inflammation is the root cause of most mental health issues. And there's a ton of research that's showing 1/3 of our American population is taking prescriptions that actually promotes worsening mental health symptoms. So prescriptions is not the answer. And unfortunately, that's the only way we treat. Mm-hmm. Mental health is the only area of medicine that doesn't get an accurate picture of the organ they treat prior to treating. They rely solely on patient reporting. And that's a very dangerous game when you have 3 separate diagnoses that present themselves with the same symptoms: depression, TBI,
and even just looking at normal data analytics, self-reported data is terrible, just generally speaking. And if you're basing your entire medical procedure off that, you can have a lot of stemming issues from it.
Which is 100%. The entire mental health community.
Yeah,
self-reported data.
Yeah, so we decided to take a different approach, a diagnostics first approach. So any patient that gets treated by us first gets a Q-spec brain scan from our partner SareScan. What that does is it gives us a 3D heat map of the brain that shows how the brain is utilizing blood flow. So from that image, we can determine if you have PTSD. It shows up in this distinct pattern of resource utilization. Mm-hmm. Traumatic brain injuries are very, very clear on these scans, as well as toxic metal exposure, depression, ADHD, and anxiety disorders. They all show up. So we can confirm or disprove diagnosis right up front with just one of the diagnostics. We also pair that with a comprehensive blood panel that looks at inflammatory markers, nutritional deficiencies, and hormone deficiencies, and then a 20-lead brain EEG where we can measure the voltage output of your brain and the coherence of your brain waves, basically how your brain is generating signals and electricity.
And communicating.
Yeah, and communicating within itself. So with all 3 of those diagnostics put together, along with patient reporting, we get a really accurate picture of exactly what's going on in the brain and the body before we do anything.
So what's your medical training?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Let's address the gigantic elephant.
That's that right there is the crux of it.
Yeah,
right. So, because you're just a couple of bubbas off the street that had a problem and started doing the work to figure it out. You didn't go to school for 10 years to understand medical and things like that.
It took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. So
yeah, that is
underwater basket.
Underwater upside down basket.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That is a testament to the mindset of most EOD techs, is that when we're curious about something, we dive into the information as much as possible. That we were very fortunate with our peer group and our mentors that they taught us that you can't just be a jack of all trades in that job. You have to know what you're doing at all times because you're trying to preserve life.
And I mean, if you think about how most medical doctors get read up on new emerging trends, they do exactly what we did. They read studies. They see what the latest research is coming out, what it's saying. And so we just followed that path and, did our best to become subject matter experts.
And assemble the right team.
And team's important.
Yeah, assemble the right team of providers. We were really fortunate. And honestly, the best compliment we've received is from some of those providers when they say, it's crazy, you guys are military veterans, started out as patients, but you speak to us like you're one of our peers. So that's a huge testament to how informed we are. And we're continuing to gather information at all times. It's not like we're just completely closed-minded. We remain open-minded about quite a few treatment interventions.
I think that's really an interesting piece. I want to jump on that just a little bit, because what you gained in the military, that the way the military shaped your thought process and the way you solved problems, the way you looked at things, is what's enabled you to do this problem solving for yourself. You got a catalyst that drove you into this Invictus Project, but the resources is from the Army and how they did those things. I mean, quite frankly, did those things to you for all those years.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Uncle Sam did some terrible things to me.
But our minds were shaped into that
Violated. So violated.
Yeah.
They tried to send me to Fort Polk, man.
Is
Yeah.
that why you got out?
Yeah.
That was literally the
Bye. Decline. Unsubscribe. Peace out.
So, you know, and I do this a lot with veteran entrepreneurs. You know, the other guys that have been at BIR and Patriot Boot Camp and Bunker Labs that I work with. It's because we as vets tend to think, well, that part of my life is over. I got to do it completely different. And what you two have done is you've validated that the resources and the skill sets that you got from the military, particularly in the EOD problem solving and analysis thought process, is what's enabled you to create this project and move it forward so far.
100%. Nobody, you don't realize how much just the military mindset, keeping EOD off the table, just the military mindset and the resiliency and the drive on that gets pounded into your skull day after day, like how much that means when you go out into the civilian world and you're dealing with people who don't necessarily have that discipline.
It can do one of two things when you get out. You can lose a piece of your identity, and it causes you to dive deeper into that downward spiral because you lose that sense of purpose, you lose that sense of community, or you can figure out what is transferable to move on to the next chapter of your life. And there's a reason veterans make really great entrepreneurs. Number one, they choose to serve a purpose greater than themselves. And number two, they're incredibly effective at solving problems when they're using the right mindset. We had a gentleman that told us once, those closest to the problem are often closest to the solution. And we had a huge problem that was affecting our quality of life, and we wanted to change that, not just for ourselves, but for the community that shaped us.
So, Dad, you drew the correlation from what they've been talking about to the military training. I heard you said, Jeff, trend analysis, and that's what I started thinking, because with my economics background, that's one of the things that I've gotten the complaints from some of my friends and things is it's a little bit too much. Oh, I can go solve that problem. A little bit too much. If you just give me the data, I can look at it, and there's got to be an easy solution there. And I was going to draw that comparison. It seems like it's the trend analysis is what stands out a lot, because you can look at it, and just by being a cog in the machine, you can see what kind of trends are going on, even if you don't have that much control over the situation. And by seeing that trend, you can identify what the source problem is and really start addressing things rather than just getting what I always call Band-Aid solutions.
And honestly, we all notice this trend. I mean, the veteran mental health epidemic is magnified, but we see it all throughout our country. The suicide rate has increased dramatically over the last decade, and how we're treating isn't working. That's not just a matter of population growth. It's literally how we're treating.
It's also not a matter of opinion either. It's
right.
It's a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Right. Like
everybody can see it, but nobody speaks about it because there's a stigma attached to it. And
I think part of that stigma too is people don't have hope. Like there isn't something like what we're doing that's mainstream that can actually address the underlying cause. It's all of those Band-Aid solutions like we were talking about. Nobody wants to go to the doctor just to get a Band-Aid. They want to go see a physician and pay their copay or whatever, or pay out of pocket to get a solution that's going to work long term. And right now that's not around.
Yeah,
we haven't scaled it yet.
We're not looking for symptom management. We're looking at trying to empower patients to rediscover that shell of who they used to be. You know, you can get to the root cause and address those root causes and have the same quality of life you had prior to suffering from those, instead of just symptom management through prescriptions.
That's what I find so sad and scary about it when you look at the statistics around suicide and mental health. Is the statistics are pretty darn obvious on who's committing suicide. For a lot of it, it's why they're doing it. And you can really paint the picture of what's happening in the country, but there's not this easy solution. So nobody wants to address it. You know, we were talking that it's not talked about much because it's a taboo. We talk about murders and homicides a lot. There's twice as many people committing suicide as there are being murdered every single year. And we don't talk about it at all. And that's where it has to start, I think, is starting to have that conversation.
Secondly, the cause of death from ages 10 to 44 is suicide right now. That's a scary statistic. 10 years old. My son's 9 right now, and I can't even imagine the world he's going to grow up in if we don't make dramatic changes.
So I look at it twofold, and I agree with you on the medical side once the problem's identified. But I also look at it on the society side, that it's become an acceptable solution to a problem. In other words, my problems are so bad. It is so bad for me. And I've never been where you two have been. So I'm talking out of my ass on this, all right? But I've known people very close to me, to include one of my rugby players, a beautiful young man that was 16 years old, straight A student, all-star state rugby player, on a path to play for our national team, who committed suicide. And I believe part of the reason he did that, although he had depression, but part of the reason he did that is it's an accepted solution in our society to solve a problem.
I think it's honestly part of the human experience to at one point to question your mortality.
Mm-hmm.
I think every single person questions their mortality at some point in their life. Those that get to the point where Sam and I were at one point is, I can speak honestly from my experience. I had exhausted all my resources that were readily available. I was going to the VA twice a week. I was lucky enough to actually have a resident that was seeing me twice a week. So I was constantly saying, hey, this isn't working. The symptoms are getting worse. I shouldn't be visualizing suicide as much as I am. And I was handed.
You were telling that to you?
Yeah, literally.
That's messed up.
And I was handed more prescriptions. And so I'd exhausted all the resources. And eventually what it came down to was, I'm ready to find my relief. I'm just tired of suffering. Like, I want to find my relief. And it's a long-term fix for a short-term problem if you can find the right treatment. But I wasn't willing to live with a shell of who I used to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect jumping off point into what we do to treat. So after we have done all these diagnostics, we get a clear picture of exactly what's going on in the patient's brain. In the case of, like in Jeff's case, Jeff was one of the first people to go through the entire treatment protocol.
I prefer Space Monkey, not Space Dummy.
Sorry, Space Monkey number 3. Space Monkey number 3 over there. We don't talk about the other space monkeys. So
we do actually.
Quiet, monkey, quiet. So Jeff's. I'm going to talk about your symptoms.
Yeah.
Jeff, before he went through our treatment protocols, was having 5 to 6 migraines a week. Had no emotional control. We could see from the brain scan that he had pretty severe axonal shearing, which is when your brain shifts inside your skull to the side.
You mean like the mass of your brain?
Yeah,
rotational. From
I was going to say, I thought I heard axial, like, so it literally the axis of your brain shifts.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was primarily from traumatic blast and from fighting. And he also had, if you look at his brain scan, it looks like a shin right here.
It's probably multiple
not so much
shins.
here,
Multiple shins.
or right here, or right here. It was on the right side. Yeah, on the right side. So the temporal lobe of the brain is where emotional regulation, short-term memory that's the focus of that section of the brain. And those were manifested severely in Jeff's symptoms. He was having trouble remembering his kids.
Sleep was non-existent.
Yeah, sleep was non-existent. Had no.
Which compounds the symptoms.
Of course, yeah. That's the restorative part of our brain's healing. And if you're not getting your sleep and you're not practicing sleep hygiene, you're not going to heal.
Yeah. So he had no emotional regulation at all. Like, if you look at his scan, you can see the baseline versus the concentration. His brain would shut down whenever it would try to fire up.
And that was a simple cognitive test.
Yeah, that was a real simple
red
cognitive.
or black cards. We're talking not anything complex whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was having all those symptoms. I mean, he had the trifecta of traumatic brain injuries. Blown up in Afghanistan, blown against a clot wall, broke his spine. Recovered from
car accident.
Yeah, recovered from that. Got in a car accident that he lost consciousness in, and then he went and fought professional Muay Thai for years. So, Space Monkey number 3, not very smart.
Yeah, and I had participated in combat sports since 2007. So, I mean, I was taking frontal impact often, but I think when you compound it with the other blast injuries and blast exposure, and then the car accident. I think that is really when the symptoms got worse, is taking that frontal impact. And Muay Thai in Thailand, that's their national sport. They don't mess around. It's brutal. It's probably the most savage combat sport you can ever be a part of. And I was very fortunate enough to train with some absolute beasts in the sport. The guys are fighting in the UFC and Glory Kickboxing, and just phenomenal guys, but you're getting repeatedly hit over the head by those guys.
Yeah.
So over and over and over. And then you're competing. And in Thailand, they expect you to compete twice a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you're not cut, you're fighting.
Yeah, so he was having all of those symptoms, and it got to the point where, I had to take it out of his hands, and I engaged the other board members and we said, hey, guess what? You're going through treatment. I don't really care what you think about it. So we voted on it, and we were able to get another nonprofit.
Did you get a vote?
No,
I did not.
No,
Like
okay.
they literally took it out of my hands. I didn't even know what was taking place. Luckily, we found another nonprofit that helps wounded EOD warriors to help out with some of the costs. But Wounded EOD Warrior Foundation, phenomenal organization that helps out our EOD community. Most guys don't even know the level of services they provide, which is sad, frankly, because it's readily available for most EOD techs. Doesn't matter a character discharge either.
Do you know Mike over?
Mike Gerard.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We
Just
just did his
making
zero K fun run 2 weeks ago. We were
Mike
there
from
with,
300 Days of Shine.
Yeah.
You know the place.
Yeah, Mike was actually my old platoon sergeant.
Was he really?
Yes.
Oh shit, small world. Man.
Oh yeah, dude, scared the piss out of me for most of my military career.
he also had the exact same feedback. If you knew Sam on active duty, you probably didn't like him. He's grown a lot since then.
I'll stay up and out. But so back to the symptoms. So we took it out of Jeff's hands, and we got his brain image in late March. We started him through our treatment protocols in early April, and since early April to this day right now, he has not had a single migraine.
I sleep better than
Wow.
I slept before. My focus is a ton better. I can actually complete tasks, whereas back in March, I was not even able to finish an email. I was forgetting people I talked to. Todd Seymour from the Veterans and Residence Program in Denver walked up to me on the street, and I could not place the guy.
He called me right after, who the hell is this guy?
He knows everything that we're doing, but I don't know who he is.
He was paranoid. Said, this guy knows everything we're doing. I don't know who he is. And I was like, what's his name? He's like, oh, I don't remember. And I was like, well, what does he do? He's like, I think someone with slot machines. I was like, oh, you're talking about Todd. Yeah, we've met Todd 6 times, man.
You've talked to him at length. So
yeah. Since he started treatment, I've never seen a traumatic brain injury patient ever get this better this fast.
So
That's amazing.
Walk us through the treatment.
Yeah,
What are the things from your side? And I'd love to hear it as the patient.
Yeah. So it starts, especially in Jeff's case, all of our treatments inform the path that the patient's going to take. So, if they don't have a traumatic brain injury, they're not going to get some of them.
The diagnostics drive the treatment plan.
So in Jeff's case, he got the whole gamut, which is good. I can walk through the whole thing. We start off with ketamine infusion therapy. Ketamine is the most powerful antidepressant, most powerful fast-acting antidepressant that human beings know of right now. It is between 70 to 80% effective at treating depression symptoms and can be effective in as little as 1 infusion. So you can take someone who has a gun in their mouth and make and reset their brain in as little as 24 hours.
Ketamine is
ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic that is used in the operating rooms today. It's used on patients that they are worried about intubating. So normally, if you went to the hospital and you were getting surgery, you would get an opiate-based anesthetic.
Yep.
Ketamine is not an opiate-based anesthetic, and because it is not an opiate-based anesthetic, it does not suppress respiration. That's also why it's used on the battlefield. So it's used by combat medics, because the last thing you want to do if someone is in shock or they're bleeding out or they have a serious traumatic amputation
Give them morphine.
Is give them morphine, because you're going to lower their heart rate and lower their respiration. So it's got a long use case. And like I said, used every day in operating rooms.
It's also gained a reputation in the party scene as well.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Special K,
like-
baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
And we
Yeah.
get a lot of uninformed. Isn't that a horse tranquilizer? It's used all the time on
Yeah,
it's the safest.
Yeah, it is one of the safest anesthetics out there as far as like side effects go. But one of the effects that this has is because it is a dissociative, it causes you to leave your body. It does this because it's an NMDA receptor antagonist. I could go into the neurochemistry offline. But that you leaving, like disassociating from your body, causes your brain to bioelectrically reset. It resets back to what's called a default mode network.
So it's not like an LSD trip where you're psychedelic. You're actually disassociated.
If you ever heard of going into a K-hole,
No,
that's
I'm pretty naive in that
it's okay.
in this
We'll
sense.
teach
Yeah.
you.
It is
coming
also
on.
it is also psychedelic. They actually say the more psychedelic the experiences, the longer term the results are for depression. But the best analogy is it's kind of like hitting Control-Alt-Delete for your computer.
Okay.
And then when you reboot that computer, it runs more efficiently, right?
Yeah, dump the cache.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and which makes it really incredibly easy to start changing some of the negative habit loops that are actually making symptoms worse within a patient.
Yeah, and it's also anti-inflammatory in nature. That was from Jeff's first ketamine infusion. His migraines went away, like
Really?
gone.
And my sleep quality overnight
tripled.
went from 7 to 10% REM, because we have data trackers.
Mhm.
We're obsessed with information. And so we look at all parts of our lifestyle to figure out how we can modify lifestyle and mitigate symptoms. Back when I was suffering in 2015, I started doing intermittent fasting because it's supposed to reduce inflammation in the body and help TBI symptoms. That's the whole reason I still continue to do it. And it's just an awesome lifestyle that works for my lifestyle at least. But in saying that, we look at data like crazy. So we track our sleep, we track our workouts, we track pretty much everything we do is journaled and recorded.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting 7 to 10% REM since about 2011. So basically, the most restorative part of your sleep, I wasn't getting at all. And overnight, literally first ketamine infusion went to 30 to 35% REM. A couple nights ago, I had 50% REM, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so can we start with ketamine? Multitude of reasons listed there. And the main one is when you can reset someone's brain who's been in that deep, dark hole, you automatically put them in a more positive mindset. And the medical research is very, very clear that mindset going into any sort of treatment affects the outcome. It affects how your body responds to everything. So,
Yeah, the placebo effect's taken into account for every single medical intervention
Right.
we have right now.
We
And
look
if
at
the
it,
patient
like,
thinks it's going to work, it's got a high likelihood of
yeah,
working.
and we looked at it and like, okay, well, we can use that effect. We can use this we can use this productively to create better patient outcomes without dipping our toes in pseudoscience.
Right. One question I wanted to touch on, just because it's, I know, Dad, you mentioned the LSD and like how, so my understanding of how that works versus what y'all are saying is you were saying, Control-Alt-Delete almost resets the brain for a second. The way I've heard it described how the LSD might work is that it basically overloads the brain for a second or for the duration. And then when it comes back down, you're able to get those reworkings. Is that a proper understanding of y'all are basically hitting it from the other direction?
Yeah.
Of that same kind of concept?
The mechanism that LSD works with in the brain is completely different. LSD is serotonergic. So if imagine this is a serotonin receptor, this class. Normally serotonin comes into the receptor like this. It binds with the receptor, and the receptor sends a nice little electrical signal through the neurons that gives you pleasure. The way LSD works is it interacts with that same receptor, but instead of the molecule being shaped like this, it's like, ha! And when the molecule interacts with the receptor in this incredibly novel way, the brain goes, whoa, what's going on? And it turns everything on.
Which can also be a bad thing when you're talking about traumatic brain injury.
Yes. Because when your brain
Because
turns...
the damaged areas are
Well,
trying to fire.
Right, because...
Task. If my brain shuts down, even in a simple cognitive task, and then all of a sudden it's activated by an external chemical, that can cause dissociative panic attacks. It can cause some severe problems.
The purple monster starts chasing you around the room.
Well, yeah, and so okay, so that's a proper understanding of that. That's where the placebo effect can come in to some extent. Is that with something like that, that's obviously a little bit more on the experimental side, where you're lighting everything up and you want to keep it towards the positive side. So then you have that little bit of the placebo effect going with the positive mindset for your operation, and you can gear it a little bit more that direction.
I want to call it more like the power of the mind.
Mhm.
Less the placebo effect, because that's got a negative.
You're right. Placebo effect makes it sound worse than
Yeah,
worse
it
than it
makes it
is.
sound really pseudoscience.
Not to mention it's well studied.
Let's
Right.
our take on it is let's prime the brain, let's prime the mindset for healing.
Let's put the body and the mind in an ideal environment for it to hyper accelerate its already natural healing process, and that's essentially what we're doing with all of the treatments.
Yeah, and
so
so
there's a lot of proof of that whole visualization. I mean, even my clients that I'm coaching, you know, in business sense and leader development, it's that, well, where do you want to be?
Yeah.
Who do you want to be in? You know,
Right,
next year.
and that psychological framing can have so much effect on in so many different areas. So it makes complete sense that if you're able to frame something in that more positive aspect, and then when you're coming out of that, you know, reset, you're in that new frame, and you can build it so much more successfully out from that frame you're already building it.
Yeah. So, sorry, just to touch on that. So, you know, what we focus on, we have a spot in our brain called the RAS, reticular activator system. So whatever we're choosing to focus on is all of a sudden brought into our line of vision. So I like to use the analogy of like, oh, I like the new Tesla. All of a sudden you start seeing a whole bunch of Teslas around. It's because your brain is focusing on it. So we start taking in that information and seeing it more often. And that works.
I call it the yellow truck effect.
Yeah, it's the red truck, son. I coined that phrase. I coined the red truck phrase.
But that works the same when a patient's controlled by their symptoms, and no matter what they do, their symptoms are controlling their life. So even getting that hard reset and that 24-hour, like literally my first dose, I had complete relief of symptoms. I always thought that suicidal ideation was going to be around forever. Knew I wasn't going to actually act on it, but I mean, I was still actively envisioning driving my truck into a concrete pillar and making it look like an accident so my family would get life insurance. And that was in March. That was 4 years after my suicide attempt. So it was amazing to find complete relief of symptoms and be like, oh, this is how I should feel.
This is how, can I feel this way all the time? So yeah, moving on from ketamine, that's the first step. The second step is we do 20 sessions of hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
If they have TBI.
If they have TBI, and we're just this is Jeff's pathway. This is
this is the complete patient roadmap.
Yeah, complete patient roadmap.
So if they have psychological issues as well as some physical damage, traumatic brain injury.
So 20 sessions of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and what we're trying to do with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, reduce inflammation in the body and the brain. Hyperoxygenate the blood, and what that hyperoxygenation does by forcing that oxygen into your bloodstream is it causes your bone marrow to produce more pluripotent adult stem cells, up to 8 times the normal amount that are flowing through your body at all times. And these are the stem cells that, like, when you go to the gym and you get a solid workout in, that when you're feeling sore the next day, all of those muscle fibers are torn. These are the cells that go in and repair those.
And they're bioavailable until the day you die. Obviously, the amount of available pluripotent stem cells decrease with age, but with hyperbaric, you can produce 8 times the amount of those bioavailable stem cells.
Yeah. And that's the main reason that we utilize hyperbaric, because we want those stem cells. So what we do with them next is we take them out of your body, centrifuge out the red blood cells. So we're left with a slurry of platelet-rich plasma and stem cells, about 3 vials. The reason we take it out is because normally, even if you were to just do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, so say you've got 8 times the normal amount of stem cells, they're not all going to get past the blood-brain barrier. You got a wall right here.
And you have other points of inflation and damage in your body.
It's attacking everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than focusing on the...
So, we take out those vials, centrifuge out the red blood cells. 2 of those vials that have the pluripotent stem cells and PRP go and They get processed through a proprietary technology that our medical director has the patent for. The first vial, if you lay on the table, you've got your head perpendicular to the floor. We take a catheter, stick it all the way up into the sinus passage here.
Plastic catheter.
Plastic. all catheters are plastic.
But we say that it's
all of them.
We say intranasal injections, and people freak out. They think we're sticking a needle up their nose.
We are not
So
sticking a needle.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, you stick the catheter in there, and you just fill the sinus passage up with platelet-rich plasma. It's able to diffuse directly past the blood-brain barrier through the sinus.
Olfactory.
Yes,
Olfactory.
Yes, there you
Really?
go.
So
Yeah.
you're basically sniffing it. You're smelling it.
No, you're
So-
laying on the table, and it's going up there. It kind of feels like you just filled your whole nose with water.
You see
Right.
sinus pressure and eye pressure when you get it. Like you feel it in your eyes. It's kind of funny because Dr. Hughes, our medical provider that does this, and he's the only one in the nation that does it. He's phenomenal, very well read on the subject, runs TBI therapy in Louisville. He compared it to waterboarding prior to our treatment. And the greatest part is though that like when Sam and I did it, we're like, if that's like waterboarding, we need a new form of torture because that was not nearly as bad as I expected.
You want me to talk? You can't handle it. So the PRP goes in first. That has over 300 growth factors in it. So those growth factors go in and immediately attach to areas that need repair. So whether that's a brain cell or a blood vessel.
So are they going into and my medical knowledge is nowhere near understanding this, but are they going into what would be like the spinal fluid, or are they going into the blood vessels?
No, it goes into the CSF and then diffuses through your whole brain.
And
your cerebral spinal fluid,
Okay.
that's the fluid-filled sac that your brain's in.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
full of CSF.
And it also roots down on the points, the actual source of inflammation.
Yeah. So it provides this scaffolding full of growth factors.
Right.
So that in and of itself would be incredibly effective. We take it to the next level with the stem cells. So 5 hours later, once the stem cells are activated, the same procedure takes place, but with the stem cells. They get dropped into the nasal passage, and now they have this scaffolding of PRP that's sitting around all these inflammation sites. The stem cells go in and attach to the PRP, just like it's a catcher's mitt in a baseball. And now you have this baby cell that can become any kind of cell that's sitting exactly where it needs to sit to make a difference. After that procedure is done, patients go back in for another 20 treatments of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and we combine that with some intranasal insulin. It's a diluted form of insulin. The goal of all this is, okay, we got the baby cell exactly where we want it. Now we need to make sure the baby cell grows up. So we're going to give that little cell all the resources it needs.
You got to make sure it's got food, water,
Yeah.
sunlight, all of those things that you want to nurture a plant, right?
Yeah.
You called it a plant there for a second. I was going to say this sounds a lot like my controlled environment agriculture stuff. You just give it everything you need, and
Just
inside
inside
everything
the
you
head,
need,
huh?
they grow so fast.
We're just plants with complex emotions and feelings. So yeah, it takes about 4 months for the stem cells to mature, and after that period, we get a second set of diagnostics, just like we did on the front end, to prove that it worked. And that's where the change happens. The change happens with doing the data collection.
Data on the back end.
Yeah, data on the back end. It's one thing to show, okay, you have a problem. It's another thing to go, all right, cool, solution. We can prove that we fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the money. That's where all this is going to become mainstream.
And we couple that with patient reporting too, because right now the medical community, especially within mental health, is primarily driven by patient reporting. So we've been very fortunate. We've been in front of the right people, including Otis at Patriot Boot Camp, that, like I said, even though the advice he gave us was like, oh my gosh, that's incredibly simple. We already knew that. Why didn't we think of it? We heard it at the right time because we had I like to call them scotomas, basically this big blind spot that's right in front of us.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome to see that we're getting the right treatments. One of the biggest downfalls for hyperbaric is that patients will see improved recovery while they're going through hyperbaric, but then they'll take 2 steps back. And so not only are we collecting the patient reporting, but that's when we start introducing lifestyle modification, behavioral modification, and psychotherapy. So we can actually change the behavior. Because if we only address the physiological problems, and the patient returns back to the same environment and still has the same family stressors and external stressors, then their symptoms are going to return. But if you can address the physiological symptoms first and give these patients some hope and some strength and realize, hey, I actually have the ability to start making some positive lifestyle changes. For instance, in my example, I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking a fifth of whiskey every night. I wasn't eating very well. I was isolating myself in my house. All of those problems make mental health symptoms worse, right? So that's really the true benefit, is addressing the physical issue first and then introducing the lifestyle modification, the behavioral modification.
Yep. And so right now we've had a couple incredibly successful case studies, and now it's time to scale it. We're going to put 10 combat veterans through our treatment protocols with diagnostics on both ends to prove in a pilot study format that this is viable, and in so doing allow the VA to pick it apart and go and spend the millions of dollars in research budget that they have and that they're forced to use, and really drill down and get into the weeds on these.
What's the timeline? Actually, let's do this. How does a vet become, the net? Obviously, you've already picked out those.
Space Monkey 4.
Yeah.
Space Monkey 4?
Yeah.
We haven't actually identified the 10,
Okay.
But patient acquisition is actually the easiest part. We have 420,000 vets in Colorado alone. And only about 30% of them receive care through the VA.
Yeah.
I would say the two biggest problems right now that we're dealing with within the veteran community is, number one, we always think that there's another veteran, another brother or sister of ours that's suffering more than what we're dealing with. So, and the way we're trained, we go right back to it. I'm going to look out for my brother more so than I'm going to look out for myself, right? It's great if he goes home and I have to sacrifice myself, right? And then the second problem is, we complain a lot about the VA, but it's not going away. I mean, that's a system, and a tremendous amount of resources is diverted to our OIF, OEF veteran community that wasn't available through Vietnam.
Right.
So the only way to shift how we're treating is to work from the inside out and get the VA to start legitimately looking at far more effective, research-backed treatment interventions that is best for the long-term patient outcome.
So Jeff, you already, go ahead.
Well, how does a vet become that guy? And then what's kind of the timeline, the vision, the vision of the timeline from first test to that I don't want to say final collection of the test, because I'm sure there's follow-ups.
Yeah, we're going to be continuing. The larger the data set and the more consistent the results are, the more consistent the findings are, the more traction we have to get the civilian mental health community to really start taking a look at this as well. Because, like I said, the veteran community mental health epidemic is just magnified. We're dealing with it in all facets of our country right now.
Yeah.
Well, so two things on that. One, going back to my main question, but also you just reminded me, my older brother, he told me some statistic the other day that as much as we talk about veteran suicide rates are now, it might have been active duty, but are now below the civilian rate. That it's been magnified and it's addressed, which is great, but it's also dropped below the civilian rate, which has gone largely overlooked.
I don't believe that's accurate, because what we've seen is on active duty, the number has increased year over year since 2006.
Yep.
Now they actually did National Guard and Reservist numbers, as well as dependents of active duty service members. They've released data on that. So, I mean, the military experience is hard on a family life, and it's hard on a personal experience. I mean, let's be honest, especially in OIF and OEF, and you have a high op tempo, and there's a lot of things that suffer because of that. A lot, not just the physical damage, but a lot of the things that we come home to, I don't think that's accurate, but I could be wrong.
Well, that's what I always get for paraphrasing statistics anyway.
80% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Right.
Just like that one.
Well, going back to my main question, and I'd like to put y'all on the spot, hopefully, with this a little bit. So obviously the Invictus Project looks like they're doing great, or has this great vision for how to address these type of problems. But what can we do for as far as sealing those cracks in the wider issue? I mean, is it as simple as keep funding the Invictus Project and y'all will cover it, or do you have a grander vision of that type?
Gotcha.
All right.
Yeah, the Invictus Project is the nonprofit that we started to help veterans, but we understand this is not just a veteran problem. So we also have a for-profit entity. It's called Invictus Health. Just incorporated it in Delaware. What we're going to do with Invictus Health is we're going to create large outpatient mental health care facilities that house our treatment protocols in the back of the house. So we'll be providing TBI, PTSD, depression treatment in the back of the house. And they will also include gyms, healthy eating facilities, yoga, acupuncture, massage therapy, sensory deprivation float tanks, talking about cryotherapy a little bit as well, all in a one-stop shop. So we'll be able to bring people in, we'll be able to fix the fundamental issues at the root of their symptoms, and then directly place them into programmatic lifestyle modifications and community that are built in.
Yep. We
also have an arm of Invictus Health that focuses on job placement. So we will be able to place our patients who are unemployed, and there's a large, that's 60% of traumatic brain injury patients are unemployed after
2.5 years.
2.5 years of their traumatic brain injury. So there's a huge subsection of our population that isn't even participating in the workforce because of their symptoms. And we can fix that and then place them into careers.
Yeah, two of the major predictors for veteran suicide is access to effective medical care and financial anxiety, or how well we reintegrate into that civilian life and essentially find that new identity since we left our old one. And we have a separate business as well where we do staffing and look for those career placement opportunities. But with Invictus Health, we're going to be able to offer full scope services. So that'll not just blue collar jobs or, getting into the trades, but also some highly technical jobs like IT engineering, network engineers. I mean, just phenomenal opportunities. And it's been mainly because we've gone in with the right intention. It's all been for the nonprofit. How do we help our community? How do we have a social impact with our business and what we're doing?
As we listen to the cuckoo clock, tell us what time it is. Yeah, just to break that pattern of thought, right?
Yeah.
You take, that disruptor hitting us in the form of the cuckoo clock.
Well, I'd like to say, Sam and Jeff, I think that was a great answer, because this is one of those things, like we talked about, it's such a prevalent issue with mental health so broadly, and so many issues that we're facing as a country today, I think can really be traced back to just broadly speaking mental health. And, it's one thing to have a politician to go up and say, we need to have a conversation about mental health. I still don't know what that means. They keep saying it every night on TV, but it's good to hear about guys like y'all that are going out and really, putting the boots on the ground and putting in the effort to get this type of solution out there.
Yeah, and the first step in this whole process is the pilot study. That's our first line effort. We're looking for $500,000 to fund this bad boy. It's going to put 10 combat vets through. It's going to give us the data we need to leverage to open that facility.
And the expensive part on that is the data collection side. Yeah. As we gain more and more data sets and find that this is widely accepted due to the consistent results, we can start eliminating some of those data sets, the diagnostics on the back end, because we've already proven how effective it is.
Yeah.
So how can we help? How can our listeners help?
Spread the word or support us. InvictusProject.com is our website.
.org.
.org. I screwed that up. So InvictusProject.org. Yeah, cut that out. Yeah, check us out at InvictusProject.org. The website's just about to get relaunched. Just did a huge overhaul of it.
Why the name exists.
And so if you haven't read the poem by William Ernest Henley, Invictus, I can read it now, or I can let you read it.
Yeah, the poet actually suffered from tuberculosis, and so it was fitting for his life. And we felt that this is something that anybody that struggles with mental health is what we want them to find, is that unconquerable spirit again. Because ultimately we do all obtain the ability to remain resilient and adaptable, and we just got to put ourselves in the ideal setting to get there. So The Invictus poem goes, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeons of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. Matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Jeff, I didn't know you knew how to read.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. And you know, the other place that poem became so familiar in society was the story of the South African rugby team. What was that? 10 plus, maybe 15 years ago, that movie.
You're looking at like 25. Oh wait, for the World Cup or for the movie?
The movie.
I was going to say 90s were about 20 years ago, old man.
Luckily, Matt Damon was in that to get some star power.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
And then also the Invictus Games, which is for service-disabled veterans to compete.
Yeah, great plug. Thanks for that. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. I've volunteered for those games too. So yeah, it's a great source and a great title and to drive forward what y'all are doing. And I want to thank y'all for what you're doing and joining us today. Cam, what'd you learn?
So, I mean, the biggest thing I learned, and I wish I'd wrote down more specifics, but Sam, you were throwing out a lot of big words. So I just didn't realize how many well-studied options and solutions there were already out in the field as far as mental health goes that we just don't hear about and aren't being used to the fullest extent possible. I mean, that gave me a lot of hope between that and what y'all are doing with your organization. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, what we're doing isn't, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. The mental health facility that we want to build on the for-profit side houses all of our providers under one roof to eliminate pain points from the patient experience. But it's called the Integrated Practice Unit. They're used all over the world, with the exception of the U.S. The only comparable model is the Mayo Clinic, which everybody knows the Mayo Clinic's reputation. And then on top of that, I mean, there's a huge problem with walking into a doctor's office and because the guy's wearing a white coat, thinking that he's got your best interest at heart or what's best for you individually. And so we kind of lead with this blind trust without informing ourselves of what that treatment may lead to. So,
great.
What did you learn?
What did I learn?
Yeah.
I was talking most of that. I was talking most of that.
Good point. Good point. You learned that you can't learn anything.
I learned that you can't learn while you're talking.
Yeah,
that may be.
That's a big one. I learned that Jeff could read.
that is a surprising.
It is, and now he's going to have to do a lot more work around the office.
That apparently is an added benefit to the treatment.
Yeah, I learned that my title in the company now has 3 additional letters. After I sat down and wrote a business plan for Invictus Health in like 8 hours, just grinded it out. And professional. Who is it?
Professional paper bitch.
Professional paper bitch.
A lot of what we call what we call officers in the EOD actually is paper bitches.
And I'm now one of them. I missed my calling as a lieutenant. I have a terrible sense of direction.
Yeah, so you fit in really well.
You would have been a great lieutenant.
I would have. I missed.
Wow. What I learned is that there is so much resources out there that if you just take a little bit of time to find it, you don't have to be a paper on the wall, or really to look back, a sheepskin on the wall that says that you have the knowledge. Although those are helpful in some cases, but because we can find such information online, we can take the time, our own research, and teach ourselves how to do something
and seek out mentors, seek out providers and experts in the field. Ultimately, if we didn't have our providers, we wouldn't be able to do any of this.
I was always really inspired by the Elon Musk quote when he was asked about Ivy League degrees. Well, I never went to Harvard, but the people that work for me did, and that was a huge inspiration to Jeff and I. Well, I don't have time to go to medical school, and this is a problem right now. I don't have 8 years and $500,000 to throw at this. Like, I've got what I got. I got these right here, so I got to build something.
Yep. Yeah, and Sam and I are complete polar opposites in every facet of our life. Literally, we've done disc profiles, we've done everything possible to figure out where the correlations are. Polar opposites, which works really well for a business partnership and also a friendship, if you can learn how to communicate effectively. And that's been one struggle of ours. I would say 2 years ago, a year ago, right up until the point where I actually got treatment, because a lot of it was falling on me.
No, it was not your fault at all, Jeff.
But there's also
a guy that nobody liked.
There's also a huge issue.
It's probably just because I spoke the truth all the time.
There's also a huge issue with mental health epidemic within entrepreneurs too, which most people, the entrepreneur life cycle creates some worsening mental health problems as well. Most entrepreneurs suffer from burnout. And that's,
depression, failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you learn, Jeff?
I learned that I could read.
Amazing for all of us.
No, like I said, Otis, you provided a lot of insight to what we needed right at the right time, and every time we interact with you, we learn something valuable. We just appreciate your support and everything that you do for us. So
awesome. Well, hey guys, I really appreciate it. Really appreciate y'all joining us today, and even more so this project, the Invictus Project. What a great way to give back to our community, and help guys and gals that have suffered not have to suffer as long, and help them get better and live better and more fulfilled lives. That's special, and it's awesome. I appreciate y'all doing that.
I think one of the biggest glaring holes in our society right now is that we seem disconnected, especially with more technology gets introduced into our life. We disconnect from, and we are very much, we need a community. We're a communal species. And one of the greatest weaknesses right now is that we are missing a population that is willing to serve somebody else. And so the faster we can integrate the veteran population back into their communities, the greater our society will be.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Again, that's invictusproject.org. That'll be in the show notes so that you can click on that. Donate as you can, provide services as you can. I mean, if this strikes a chord with you, contact us. Like I said, I think on your website, invictusproject.org, there's a contact link on there, and there's a donate button on there. So every little bit helps. I mean, if you can write a check for $500,000 to support this project, that'd be freaking awesome. If it's $5, that'd be freaking awesome. I really appreciate what y'all are doing, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.